to Karnataka, Maharashtra, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, from Gujarat to Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, and Uttar Pradesh. The fourth issue of the journal features 10 paintings and 6 articles written by children, with one first ever book review by a child. And to that, I would add that I personally read the book reviewed, which is Otessa's My Year of Rest and Relaxation, a year ago only. And the understanding that has been brought out by this child, Priya, is better articulated and understood than I think I would have ever done at that age and even today. The previous issues had various themes. Isha, could you throw some light on that?
Yes, ma'am. The first issue was published in October 2021 and focused on the theme Impact of COVID-19 Pandemic on Lives of Children. The first issue was launched by Honorable Justice Ravindra S. Bhatt, Judge Supreme Court, Honorable Deputy CM and Minister of Education, Mr. Manish Sisodia, and Ms. Yasmin Ali Haq, UNICEF India Chief. The second issue was published in August 2022 on the theme Disrupted Childhood, Disrupted Education. The second issue was launched by Honorable Justice B.V. Nagaratna, Judge Supreme Court, and Honorable Deputy CM and Minister of Education, Manish Sisodia, sir. The third issue was published in February 2023 on the theme Moving On, the Pandemic and Beyond, launched by Honorable Justice Hema Kohli, Supreme Court of India, and Chief of Education, UNICEF India, Mr. Terry Dornian.
I think our guests have arrived and they'll be here shortly. So just to use the time well, as usual, we created a small Mentimeter quiz for the audience to be engaged with us in that. Can we have that on screen?
I request everyone to please scan the QR code that is displaying on the screen. And the question is, how are you feeling today?
We've got a bunch of answers from intrigued, relaxed, honored. I do want to know who's very relaxed here, because even I would love to be that. Curious, energetic, glad, fabulous, great, sleepy. That one I would relate to. Intellectual, extremely excited, and I hope that the energy is more towards energetic, enthusiastic, and less towards sleepy for the next 1.5, 2 hours that we're all gathered here today. I would have to cut short on the quiz right now because our guests are here. So maybe next time we'll get to do the entire thing again. Our chief guests of today's event, Honorable Minister of Education and Women and Child Development, Delhi NCT, Ms. Atishi, and Professor Philip D. Jaffe, member UNCRC, have arrived.
Let us give a huge round of applause to all our dignitaries.
Very good evening to everyone present here. As we all know, we have gathered here for the much-awaited release of the fourth issue of the journal Children's First, an endeavor of DCPCR to deepen the discourse on issues pertaining to children by publishing research papers and policy critiques. Today, my co-anchor is Isha Podar, a student of class 12 of Sarvodaya Vidyalaya School, Sector 8, Rohini. Isha herself is an enthusiastic painter and was a child contributor in the previous issue. Today amongst us, we have the Honorable Minister of Education and Women and Child Development, Delhi NCT, Ms. Atishi Singh, as our chief guest for the event. We are also privileged to have amongst us Professor Philip D. Jaffe, former Vice Chair and current member, UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, our advisor, Ms. Soledad Herrero, Chief of Child Protection, UNICEF India, and our Chief Editor of the journal, Dr. Vinita Kaul ma'am. Along with that, we are also graced with the presence of Mr. Shailendra Sharma, Principal Advisor to the Director of Education. We would now like to request Mr. Anurag Kundu, the Chairperson DCPCR, to kindly accompany our honorable dignitaries to come on stage. Shailendra Sharma, sir, you are also to be on the stage. To felicitate our chief guest for the event, I'd like to call Ritika, a child contributor, to please do the honors. I'd like to call the child contributor Bernavo to please felicitate Professor Philip D. Jaffe. To felicitate Soledad Herrero, ma'am, I'd like to call Bhumi.
I request Ria to felicitate Dr. Vinita Kaul ma'am. I request Karishma to felicitate Shailendra Sharma sir. Ladies and gentlemen, let us give a huge round of applause to all our dignitaries. She is never going to stay away from her world of school, friends, parks, and places. Seeing her world after 2 long years was nostalgic and bittersweet. The school was basically her second home. These were the words used by Ritika, a child contributor, in describing returning back to the school. Many students sadly could not either go back to the school, and for many, schools are not a world that has welcomed them with open arms. One day, every child will use Ritika's words in describing their school. DCPCR has played a significant role in shaping children's life by providing them with the protection and care they need. The journal by DCPCR is a reflection of work done by different stakeholders with the same perspective. I would now like to request respected Chairperson DCPCR, Mr. Anurag Kundu, to set context of today's event. Let us welcome him with a huge round of applause.
Good evening, everyone. Honorable the Minister, Professor Philip Jaffe, Dr. Vinita Kaul, the Chief Editor, Ms. Soledad, the UNICEF India Child Protection Chief, Mr. Shailendra Sharma, Principal Advisor Education, the distinguished audience, and most important, the children in the room and not, both. Good evening to everyone. Let me, Ms. Soledad and Dr. Kaul, following me, will talk more about the journal and in much greater detail than I ever can. But let me try and answer the question of why publications matter and why we have the journal in the first instance. This journal, and I don't claim that this is the only one that does so, but this journal is essentially an attempt to tell stories, stories of a very young boy who once called us on a helpline at the height of COVID second wave, 16-year-old boy, and called a helpline and asked that, and he said, both my parents are dead and next to me. What's the correct process for cremation? It's a story, it's an attempt to tell the story of a pregnant woman who is trying to navigate the very intimidating processes of government hospital system. This journal is an attempt to tell a story of a child who just wants to play and jump around for no reason. This journal is an attempt to tell a story of a girl who wakes up in the night in complete horror, essentially reliving the horror of sexual violence that she was subjected to. This journal tells stories. The stories are written in different formats. Sometimes they're written in direct voices format. The other times they're written in the format of a research paper. And other times in the form of a critique or commentary on a policy, or an examination, an incisive examination of a Supreme Court or High Court order. But ultimately, in different formats and shape and sizes and approaches, this journal is an attempt to tell the stories. And continue to tell the stories because the stories deserve to be rewritten. Those stories shouldn't be destined to continue like this or shouldn't happen in the first instance. India completed 75 years of independence last year. At some stage, because it's just a clock, we will complete 100 and 200 years as well. But I think this is a good year for us to reflect as to how much progress or what kind of journey have we traversed for our children. Of course, India has made huge strides on multiple sectors. It could be immunization, for instance, or getting children to school and read. But we can do more. And perhaps this year could be a great reflection of the stories that we get to hear, that we get to observe, get to experience, get to read, and ask ourselves, what kind of India do we want to see when we are into the 100th year of independence, which is not very far off. It's much closer than we think. Not very far from here, a few days ago, a girl was stabbed, and stabbed 36 times. And those are the stories that must make us reflect of what kind of India do we have, what kind of India do we want to build, what kind of India have we already built? And again, not too far from here, in a school in Faridabad, a boy last year in February committed a suicide. And he committed a suicide, about 15-year-old. He committed a suicide because he was repeatedly being told that he was gay. He likes boys. Hopefully, this journal is going to continue to tell the stories where we ask ourselves, how do we do better? How do we become better? How do we behave better? And how do we rewrite our own actions, our own words, our language, and everything that we do and we are. So this journal, hopefully, is just that. And we hope to continue till those stories exist and aren't rewritten to our liking. Thank you very much. Welcome to the event.
Thank you, Anurag sir, for your words. An important step taken by the Commission has been launching its children's first journal. And what makes it stand out from many journals is the kind of inclusivity it aims for. I would now invite Ms. Soledad Herrero, who serves as an advisor for the journal, to shed light on the vision and the purpose of the journal.
Members on the dais, Honorable Minister, pleasure to see you once again. Professor Philip, welcome again to India. Dr. Benita Ji, thank you so much for all the support that you've been offering, and of course, great pleasure to be invited by Mr. Anurag once again. So, Mr. Anurag did a very already good overview, right, of why a journal. So I'm actually going to take a step forward and let's catch our breath and perhaps reflect of why children should matter, right? And making justice of the title of the journal. Of course, the first and most obvious argument is that the statistical argument, right? 1 out of 3 persons in this world is actually a child, and not to mention that India has the largest cohort of children in the world. There is also a lot of developmental and even social capital arguments. We know that there is no phase in the life of a person in which we have as much potential and capacities as we do when we are children. So what happens, or rather what it doesn't happen in the course of our childhood, will be a strong determinant of what is the capacities to succeed and reach our full potential later in life. This huge potential also comes with some vulnerabilities, which leads us also with some accountability and even political arguments and reflections that are important in this debate. On the one hand, we do have special responsibilities that were crystallized in the form of additional rights, but there is also a paradox, because no matter the importance of it, children are largely politically irrelevant, and that's why we also have a strong responsibility, all of us as key stakeholders and duty bearers, on protecting them. I know that this is a very educated audience, and we know that we have the privilege to work under the premises of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, which is no more, no less than the most ratified human rights convention. So we have a very strong legal and normative framework, but now we have to live up to the expectations. I started with the statistical argument, and I guess the reflection that I want to leave here is, if 1 out of 3 people in the world are children, do we really spend 1/3 of our time, our resources, our discourse, our time, our political capital, our economic capital, do we spend 1/3 of them on children? I know that we know, all of us, the answer there. And I think is one of the obvious reasons, or the main reason why initiatives like this are very much required. Of course, I do want to recognize really the leadership of DCPCR and the vision of Mr. Anurag of starting brewing this idea and giving us, for all of us that have been engaged, the privilege to accompany this thinking process. We know that what is not measured, it doesn't exist, and we know that whatever there is no evidence on will remain invisible. And we also know way too well, and Anurag was referring to some of the stories, that already children, the challenges that children face already remain in invisible corners of society, under the carpet of wrong notions of what privacy should mean, or wrong understanding that of parenting as an unlimited right over the life of the children. And I think this is a critical reflection that we need to do, and why it is so important to throw light, to throw research, to throw evidence, to throw stories, as Anurag was referring to make a change in this regard. There was a particular context in which this journal was born, and it was very much born in a contextual moment in which children were even more invisible because of the COVID situation, which we know very well that led children experiencing isolation, grief, anxiety, but also left them far away from those protection and supportive systems that can help some of these children that may face challenges. Moving into a little bit of a thinking process, or what was being the evolution, right, in that regard. We know that the previous, and the journal was born out of also that particular context in which the world, as well as India, and especially in the second wave, we were immersed on. That led to the first and the second issue of the journal to really have a deep dive focus on what it was meaning, the COVID situation for the children, and perhaps using the Secretary General words, COVID might have not, or children may have not been the face of the crisis, but they were definitely one of the greatest victims of the COVID situation. We move beyond that, and the journal has moved also to try to move beyond the COVID lens, and the third issue was what happened after COVID, and now is open up to also recognize the variety and complexity of multidisciplinary approaches, right, that are required to fulfill the rights of the children. Is move in a scope, is also move geographically, and the presenters and the moderators were also throwing some numbers and some experiences, and something that I really want to recognize is how the DCPCR has managed to move and really position this journal to embrace the complexity, the diversity, and the richness that the country offers in terms of good practices and reflections around children's rights, and is even having the ambition to project the journal and the learnings within it beyond the India boundaries. Of course, a very distinctive feature, and something that the journal has embraced that we really need to celebrate, is how the journal has made a very serious attempt to embrace also children's voices and participation, and also moving beyond some tokenistic approaches, and the fact that there is now proper content, from children, by children, is absolutely amazing. And I do want to recognize, before I leave the podium, the special role that also Dr. Vinita, you had in the stewardship of this process, and it's been thanks to her leadership, and I really want to make a special recognition here that it's been really thanks to her role and bringing these voices, in addition, of course, to the standards of quality that the journal has achieved, that this has been possible. So I'll just conclude by really recognizing that, I'm in the podium with, surrounded by children's rights champions, and I see many of the national champions' faces that are here today, in addition with a lot of children, to recognize that, of course, there is no more urgent, but as well more fulfilling and impactful cause that we all can embrace than working on issues of children's rights. I'm also taking the podium in a very particular personal moment, expecting my second child in a few months. So, let's also celebrate what children bring in our society, and let's have the commitment and also the hope that this journal will contribute in a meaningful way to enhance the visibility of the issues, the challenges, but as well as the opportunities that children bring into our life and our world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Our words are the most important tool we have, and it is the same when it comes to children, the language and vocabulary we use with them. The words they read are also thus extremely important, which is also what makes it important that such journals be published wherein children read words, not only affirming them of their rights and learn a language of rights, but also learn it from each other. With this thought, I would now like to invite the chief editor of the journal, Dr. Vinita Kaul, to kindly come to the dais and share her vision and journey with the journal. Let us give her a huge round of applause.
Honorable Madam Education Minister, I'm getting confused because you have so many portfolios. Minister for Education, Women and Child Development, and many other portfolios, Atishi ji. I'm very happy to be here to welcome Professor Philip Jaff, who's come from, he's a UNHRC representative. We have Soled Zadad, who's already a member of our advisory committee, one of our family. We have Mr. Shailendra Sharma, who's the advisor to education. And we have our head chairperson of the DCPCR, Anurag Kundu. So it's a great honor for me to, again, have the opportunity to introduce and present the journal to you, the next issue of the journal. Before I just do that, I would like to just take on from where Anurag talked about, so beautifully gave an introduction to the journal himself, that I don't think I need to say anything further. And so did Soledad. She took it on from there. And I would just like to say it in one sentence. As they were talking, just occurred to me that actually this is one opportunity where we talk about children. The journal provides us that opportunity to talk about children. We do talk about education, we talk about health, we talk about nutrition, we talk about each of these disciplines, but from a very discipline-dominated perspective. How often do we really get an opportunity to talk about children and children's lives? That is, I think, something, and what actually are their experiences. And this journal provides us that opportunity, not only when we read it, but also when it is released and a lot of discourse and discussion happens around it. So that gives us a very good opportunity. I'm happy to introduce the 4th issue of this journal. This is a biannual journal, which is a biannual and peer-reviewed journal, which comes out every May and every December. And this is the May issue that we are bringing out, the 4th issue of this journal. This is actually it has the support of a very significant, very eminent set of people. We have an advisory committee that has been chaired by Justice Lokur. It has a lot of highly professional individuals who are members of that committee and from whom the advice is sought. We have a very accomplished professional editorial committee, which represents several disciplines. And then they are actually backed up by a set of very extensive set of peer reviewers, a panel of peer reviewers who are actually the backbone, because they are the ones who review, because we have a process of blind review and a double review for each paper. And that process helps us not only to maintain the rigor and discipline of the journal and its quality, but also requires a lot of effort where the peer reviewers really contribute to it. As I was saying that earlier, that I think the journal has 3 unique features which I would like to introduce. The first is perhaps, as Anurag said, that it is perhaps the first journal that I know of, and maybe there are others as well, which is really trying to create awareness and understanding of children and their rights and children's issues. It is actually not only bringing in perspectives. I think Soledad talked about the format of the issue, of the journal, sorry. The journal has a mixed format, which is again a unique feature of the journal, in the sense that it has research, it has best practices, it has critique and commentary, it has voices from the field, and it has an interview. Every journal has a specific invited interview. And there's also, what is very interesting and very delightful is that it has children's voices in it also, children's art and children's writings. So this brings in the participation of the children as we talk about the right to participation. It is also multidisciplinary by the very nature of it, because it opens up to all rights of children. And by the multidisciplinary nature of it makes it again very unique, because this not only offers an interface of research and practice and advocacy, it also brings in the interface of different disciplines, which I think is not very common. And you see not very many opportunities or even evidence of much cross-discipline discourse. So this brings in that perspective, multiple perspectives, all related to the children. And then also there is not only the interface between multiple disciplines, but also between research and practice, because very often research is conducted, I would say, in ivory towers, and the distance between research and the field is often very extensive. So this brings the two closer and provides the perspectives to each separately. So it is really, from that point of view, very, very commendable. We've had different themes for the four issues that we've had. As I think Soledad has already said, that the advisory committee decides what the theme would be. And we started in 2023, when 22-23, when actually 22 to be more exact, when the COVID was still in its prime, the COVID pandemic, and there was no other topic to discuss but that. The schools were going through a process of 2 years of school closure, and that had its own impact and ramifications for children's lives. And therefore, the entire concentration of all the submissions we were getting were on COVID and the impact of COVID. And that became the theme of the first issue, which was COVID-19 disrupted childhoods, disrupted education. The second issue, by the time the second issue came, we were able to, by the time the third issue came, we were able to move out of the COVID scenario, and fortunately so, and the topic was moving on the pandemic and beyond. So that was there. I think I missed one of them, but anyways, I'll move on. And what happens as I said, the first issue was concentrated more on education, because there was a lot of research happening at that time, a lot of documentation of experiences related to what was happening with COVID in terms of processes, in terms of the field situation. And therefore, it was concentrated more on education and to some extent on other children's issues. But as we moved into the third issue, it became much more broader. And we were able to get a lot of contributions in other areas as well. For example, physical and mental health of children, child abuse, nutritional challenges, and even to the extent of a lot of feedback and paper submissions on online versus in-person education. We also had, the third issue, we had a very delightful section on, from children on their writings, original writings and artwork on back to school, because they had come back after 2 years, and we tried to document their experiences. Now we are excited to bring out the fourth issue to you. And it's not only just because we are adhering to our biannual timetable, because this issue you will find has further broadened the perspective from the specific thematic focus to a much more widening of an open-ended and inclusive approach towards a range of concerns, as well as documentation of experiences with children. We have some very positive experiences, some major concerns that are being reflected in this issue. The topics have moved on to law, protection, and destitute care, to social marginalization, education quality regulation, which goes more systemic, and even wider spectrum of issues pertaining to sensitivity and ethics vis-a-vis research on children. I mean, this is again the ethical aspect of research. There are discussions on that, child marriage, investment in adolescence, and women's employment. So it's not only limited now only to children, but even to the rather larger world of children, which includes others, like the parents, the caregivers, the people who are engaged with children's issues have also come into this perspective. And we have a very welcome addition in this issue, which is a book review. We have a book review section every time, and there is a book review by a child. So this is something that is a new addition. And I think with that, I would like to close the introduction to this issue. And it's going to be released very soon. And I hope that you will not only have an opportunity to read the journal, but also enjoy it and find something meaningful for yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Since the journal is children first, it is very natural that the voices of children, their opinions, and their views get reflected in it. We have received many contributions in the form of poems, articles, and illustrations. We are now going to felicitate some of our child contributors.
इस जर्नल को पूरे भारत में बच्चों से लगभग 2300 सबमिशन प्राप्त हुए थे। जर्नल में बच्चों द्वारा 10 पेंटिंग और 6 लेख शामिल हैं। आइए हम इन बाल कलाकारों का अभिनंदन करें। भूमि, जिनकी पेंटिंग जर्नल में प्रकाशित हुई है, वह RSKV विनोद नगर, दिल्ली से 12वीं कक्षा की छात्रा हैं। मैं अनुरोध करती हूँ माननीय मंत्री आतिशी मैम से कि वे भूमि को पुरस्कृत करें।
Umaima Islam contributed a painting to the journal's 4th issue. She is a student of class 11 from Sarvodaya Kanya Vidyalaya, Noor Nagar, Delhi. I request Honorable Minister Atishi ma'am to felicitate her.
I now request Professor Philip D. Jaffe to felicitate Karishma Dalal for contributing a painting to the journal's 4th issue. She is a student of class 2nd from the Delhi Public School, Vasant Kunj. I would now like to invite Ms. Soledad Herrero to felicitate Midul Manal, who contributed a painting to the journal's 4th issue. He is a student of class 12 from New Greenfield School, Saket.
Tanishi contributed a write-up to the journal's 4th issue. She is a student of class 8 from International Bharati School, Rohtak. I request Dr. Vinita Kaul to felicitate her. Barnava Bagchi contributed a painting to the journal's 4th issue and is a student of class 7th from Mayur Public School. I request Shailendra Sharma to felicitate him.
Thank you so much. When I was talking to Mithit Didi, when we first met, I told her how nice it would be if each child had same opportunities, the same platform, and also had the same support that my sister and I received from our parents. It is like a child contributor wrote, we don't get to choose where we are born. No matter what, life must be fair for all children, and parental support is one step closer to such a life. Leaving you with that thought, I would like to invite Honorable Minister of Education and Women and Child Development, Delhi, Ms. Atishi Ma'am, to share with us on outlining Government of Delhi's vision and initiatives for Delhi's children.
Thank you so much. All the dignitaries on the dais, Professor Philip Jaffe, Vice Chair UNCRC, Professor Vinita Kaul, who is not just the chief editor of this journal, but one of our longest standing associates in all the things we have done in the past many years, Ms. Soledad Herrero, Anurag Kundu, who has, as chairperson of DCPCR in the last 3 years, done so much in this commission that probably hadn't happened for many, many, many years, not just in Delhi, but across the country. Shailendra ji, our many other colleagues, friends, and the wonderful children who have done all this amazing artwork. First of all, many congratulations to DCPCR for the 4th edition of the journal Children's First. I think that just the name of the journal in itself says so much. Children First. And I think this is something that DCPCR really needs to be congratulated for. That over the last few years, all of their work, all of their interventions have repeatedly made us think and remember that children have to come first. And the journal in its previous editions is marked by so many voices, not just of researchers, not just of educationists, but their philosophy of children first is reflected even in the journal where the voices of children are present. So many, many congratulations to DCPCR and especially to Anurag for this. I think that children need to be first has been brought home very starkly to us for the people who live in Delhi, for the people who have been watching the news in the last couple of days, with the brutal murder that happened in Delhi just a few days ago. All of us saw on television, all of us saw on social media, how a teenage girl was brutally murdered, repeatedly stabbed, after that almost crushed to death while onlookers looked on. And while we have been debating that news and there has been a lot of discussion on what happened, why it happened, who is responsible. And yes, of course it is a law and order situation which needs to be changed. But I think that it has definitely raised a much deeper question for all of us as a society, for all of us as a country, as to where have we gone wrong? Where have we gone wrong that there can be such anger, such violence in someone that they can actually stab someone 36 times? And not only did the individual who committed the crime responsible, but also when all of us saw the videos, you had so many onlookers who were just standing there and seeing it happen. And so yes, definitely I think that for all of us as a society and as a country, there is a question that we need to answer, that what is it that we should be doing? What is it that we should be doing as a nation? What is it that we should be doing as parents? What is it that we should be doing as educationists? That this should not happen in Delhi, this should not happen in India, this should not happen in any part of the world. And I think that that is a question that we really need to look deep into ourselves in terms of how all of us are contributing to the society that we live in. In the last 8 years, the government of Delhi has been committed to a vision to provide equal opportunity to every child. We live in a very deeply unequal society. And in India, it is often said, I don't know if you know this, Professor Jaffe, but in India, it is often said that your destiny is written in the lines in your hand. And there is a lot of palmistry that happens in this country, and people read your palm. And I've always thought that in many ways, given the inequality in our country, it's not entirely wrong. The reason it's not entirely wrong is that a child's future gets decided by the time when at the age of 3, they take admission into a school. If I come from a well-to-do family, and my parents can afford the fees of an expensive private school, then I'm going to get a good school education. After that, I'm going to get admitted into a good college of my choice. I finish that higher education, and I'm going to be able to either set up my own business or get a high-paying job right out of my college or any other higher education institution. On the other hand, if I come from a family that cannot afford to pay the fees of an expensive private school, then I'm forced to take admission in a government school. Data from across the country shows that there's more than a 50% chance that a child who gets admitted into a government school is not going to finish their schooling. Even if they do finish their schooling, the standards of education and the quality of education is so poor that they don't actually come out of school not having learnt much, and therefore not having many opportunities. And many children who are passing out of government schools end up working as domestic help, end up working as assistants in shops, end up working as mechanics who work in car stores. I'm not saying that there is anything wrong in working as domestic help. I'm not saying that this work of a mechanic, of an assistant, of a domestic worker is any lesser than any other work. The problem is when the child or the young adult has no other choice. And that is the country that we have created. That children across the country, because of the lack of high-quality education available, which is available free of cost, because of this lack of high-quality education, most children in this country have no choice. And I think that really is something that we need to change if we need to change the country that we live in. For the last 8 years, the government of Delhi has been committed to improving the quality of education. And not just as the Minister of Education for this city, but as a citizen of this city, I think that it is, the government has really set an example. I mean, if I was to use a lighter phrase, the government has put its money where its mouth is. And this is a government that has, over the last 8 years, every year spent 25% of its budget on education. This is the only state which allocates so much of its budget to education. And consistently for the last 8 years, the government has invested the largest proportion of its budget on education. In fact, there are many in the audience who don't come from India, who come from other parts of the world. And I think I would like to say that the school auditorium that you're sitting in really represents this change. You might not realize it, but do also go visit schools maybe in other parts of the country. And then you would realize that, and I'm sure that many of the others who are sitting with you, who are familiar with how Indian public schools look like, what Indian government schools look like, will tell you that this kind of infrastructure, high quality infrastructure, is just not available to students across the country. Now, while infrastructure may not provide quality of education, infrastructure does give the students a sense of self-worth. Because otherwise, when a student enters a ramshackle institution, a classroom where there are no desks, a classroom where windows are broken, lights are broken, the message is very clear. The message is clear that the child going into a public school is a second-grade citizen. and they don't matter, and they are not going to make it anywhere in the world. And the kids who do matter are the ones who go into the shiny private schools with their nice buses and their nice buildings and their nice books. And from that very moment, you're giving a message to the child that you don't matter. And this really is the beginning that ends up in the kind of brutality that we have seen a few days ago. When you have given a message to a child right from the time when they are 3 years old, 5 years old, 8 years old, that they don't matter and they don't have anywhere they're going to make it in the world, then their unhappiness, their anger, their frustration is bound to vent itself somewhere in our society. So I think we as a society and we as a country need to be very clear that when instances of violence like this happen, then all of us for a few days begin to feel that, oh, something really bad has happened, something needs to be done. But till we as a society, we as a country, commit to the fact that children need to be first, that children need to be the first priority of a government, that we need to invest in these children and we need to invest in their future, our society is not going to fundamentally change. And I think this is really what all of us, and I think in this citizens, non-profit organizations, on institutions like DCPCR, institutions like UNICEF, universities, all have a role to play. But second, I also feel that in addition to providing high-quality infrastructure, in addition to improving the basics of a school in terms of how teaching learning happens, I think the second thing that we as a society need to fundamentally relook and rethink is what is it that we are teaching in our schools. Right now, when students come into schools, we spend 14 years teaching them things that they're probably never going to use the rest of their life. And I often joke with my niece, who is now in grade 9, and who struggles with mathematics, that the last time I used quadratic equations was when I gave my last exam for mathematics. And when I gave my exam on quadratic equations, I have never, ever in my life needed to use those again. And yet we spend so many years, year after year, teaching children with disciplines, with subjects, concepts, and most of them are never ever going to use in their lives. And many far more core fundamental issues that children face as human beings, that they face in terms of what kind of, as social beings, as citizens, those issues at the core are not addressed. And I'm happy to share that in the last few years in Delhi, we have been looking to make interventions on this front as well. We have introduced what we call 3 mindset curricula. Rather than your conventional disciplines of English, Hindi, mathematics, science, geography, history, we have introduced 3 mindset curricula. Number 1, the happiness curriculum. Number 2, the Desh Bhakti or the patriotism curriculum. And number 3, the entrepreneurship mindset curriculum. So these 3 curricula have been introduced, which are looking to make a child or an individual look within themselves. And happiness curriculum that is looking to transform how students look at themselves, their own sense of self-worth, the relationships they have with students. The Desh Bhakti or the patriotism curriculum, which is looking to see what kind of role they should be playing in society. And the entrepreneurship mindset curriculum, which is looking to change the mindset of children just looking for that one perfect government job, which is going to change their lives. And I think that the results, still in the early days, are very promising. But I think that this really has to form the foundation of any society that is looking to transform itself. We live in a country with 140 million or crores? 140 million, 140 crores. We live in a country that has a population of 140 crores. A country that is going to need 30 million more jobs by 2030. And I think as a country which has deepening inequality, we really need to be thinking, and we have to thank Delhi Commission for Protection of Child Rights, that from today, we need to be thinking about how do we keep our children first, that we can actually create a country, we can actually create a planet which is more equal, more just, and a happier place to live in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And now we come to the much awaited moment, the release of the 4th issue of Children First Journal.
For this, I request our dignitaries on the stage to be joined by Ms. Ranjana Prasad, Member DCPCR, Ms. Nidhi Ma'am, Member DCPCR, Ms. Vandana Bhardwaj, Head of School, Veer Savarkar Sarvodaya Kanya Vidyalaya, Ms. Vandana Prasad, Ma'am, Mr. Ronald. I request all of you to please come on stage to do the honors. And Member Secretary, Mr. Joshi, DCPCR. I also request Ms. Nandini Ma'am and Ms. Rita Sharma Ma'am to come on stage to do the honors.
A thunderous round of applause for this moment. The fourth issue explores concerns across multiple domains and disciplines concerning the rights of children, from legal to social protection, alternate care to regulation of education quality, and an even wider spectrum of issues pertaining to sensitivity and ethics with research on children, child marriage, investment in adolescent development, motherhood, and women's employment. The broad theme of the fourth issue is based on children's issues and their rights.
Thank you so much to all the dignitaries on stage to do the honors for releasing the journal today. Moving on, we are indeed privileged to have a keynote address today to be given by Professor Philip Jaffe, former Vice Chair and current member of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child, which is the UN's apex body that monitors the implementation of the Convention of the Rights of the Child by its state parties. He is a university professor, psychotherapist, and specialist in legal psychology. As the former Vice Chair and current member of UNCRC, since 2019, Sir has been currently re-elected for a second mandate until 2027. He is committed to improving the situation of children around the world. On several occasions, he has been privileged to be called on to perform humanitarian missions for major international government institutions in several troubled regions of the world, such as Caucasus, Iraq, or Aceh province in Indonesia. I welcome you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, and ladies and gentlemen, hello to you, and hello to the organizers and all the distinguished guests that are on the stage. I was going to salute the Madam Minister, but she had to leave, and I look forward to meeting her some other time, and to my Swiss friends as well, who are here today from the embassy and actually from Switzerland. So let me thank the organizers and express that I'm very honored to participate in this important event alongside so many distinguished speakers and guests. Let me start by congratulating DCPCR for the reason of today's gathering. As you just saw, I'm of course referring to the publication of the fourth issue of the flagship publication, Children First, Journal on Children's Lives. Having collaborated myself with several professional peer-reviewed journals, I know the amount of work that goes into each issue, especially when you reach for quality. You will have to forgive me, having just emerged this past Friday from a grueling session of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child. I was lucky to have an advanced issue that I could browse through, but only browse through, and the quality of the articles are really amazing. I was also very pleased to read an interview of Anne Skelton, who is a colleague of mine on the Committee on the Rights of the Child, who was in India just a few weeks ago, and who is now the chair of the Committee on the Rights of the Child. I have been asked to speak about the role of education. If I'm reading from my cell phone because I have a more elaborate speech at the hotel, which is on my computer, and I don't have it. So I'm composing a little bit from my earlier notes, so please bear with me. I've been asked to speak about the role of educators in strengthening support for systems for adolescents. Now, this is a very vast subject, which probably requires a more specialized scholar and not the generalist that I have become. But I'm not one to elude a challenge, especially because it triggered personal recollections that helped sharpen the rest of my intervention. So let me first share some personal history and build from there. In many ways, I was fortunate to avoid schools until pre-adolescence. As a young child, I had attended kindergarten, but my family moved to East Africa for several years, and given that my father was a roaming field geologist, formal education only took place through a correspondence program with my own mother as a day-to-day teacher. Many of you are already anticipating, perhaps, that I'm going to assert that she was much more than a teacher, in the sense that a teacher provides education, and an educator, who can also sometimes be a teacher, is in a different category beyond providing education beyond acquiring scholastic knowledge. Later, when we moved to Europe, I was unable to settle down in formal school settings, and I got kicked out of many fine institutions, ran away from many others before I got kicked out of them, and in the end, learning as much or more from reading on my own, but also, and this is extremely important, from a few very inspiring teachers. So to summarize my thinking so far, educators come in many shapes and forms. And adolescence is a curious period of life during which there are a few in-depth changes that are not always predictable. A period during which one formatted size of teaching and education do not fit every adolescent. So please don't get me wrong. My intervention is not a call to arms to abolish formal education. I certainly understand that there is a need for a structured, institutional, in-school education in a country as populated as India, which requires tens of millions of teachers to operate in an organized way for the good of upwards of 250 million adolescents. I must say the scale makes my head spin a bit. But at the same time, I do subscribe to what a great French pedagogue, Philippe Mérieux, provocatively wrote, quote, "Schools are the closest descendants of army barracks." Now that I have got that off my chest, let me move on to a more child rights discourse, which you are probably expecting from a member of the Committee on the Rights of the Child. So the starting point will be the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the most relevant article being Article 29, which paints education in the broadest terms. It reads in part that education is to be directed to the development of the child's personality, talents, and mental and physical abilities to their fullest potential. Also, to the development of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, as well as the development of respect for the child's parents, his or her own cultural identity, language and values, for the national values of the country in which the child is living, the country from where he or she may originate, and for civilizations different from his or her own. Also, to the preparation of the child for responsible life in a free society, in the spirit of understanding, peace, tolerance, equality of sexes, and friendship among all peoples, ethnic, national, and religious groups and persons of indigenous origin. And last but not least, to the development of respect for the natural environment. And I will come back to that point in just a little bit. Let me cite two other fundamental child rights documents. In a somewhat outdated document on the aims of education, the committee asserts the need for education to be child-centered, child-friendly, and empowering, and it emphasizes the importance of more collaborative and participatory pedagogy. Curricula for secondary education should be designed to equip adolescents for active participation, develop respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, promote civic engagement, and prepare adolescents to lead responsible lives in a free society. To develop adolescents' fullest potential and keep them in school, consideration should be given to how learning environments are designed to ensure that they capitalize on adolescents' capacity for learning, motivation, and work with peers and empowerment, and focus on experiential learning, exploration, and limit testing. Interesting how, reading this last sentence, how you can fit adolescent exploration and limit testing in the same sentence, but that's a side of it. The second relevant document is on the implementation on the rights of the child during adolescence, in which the Committee on the Rights of the Child recognizes adolescence as part of the life course. To paraphrase the committee, adolescence is considered a valuable period of childhood in its own right, but it is also a critical period of transition and opportunity for improving life chances. Positive early childhood interventions and experiences facilitate optimal development as young children become adolescents. However, any investment in young people risks being wasted if their rights throughout adolescence do not receive adequate attention. Furthermore, positive and supportive opportunities during adolescence can be used and should be used to offset some of the consequences caused by harm suffered during early childhood, and it should build resilience to mitigate future damage. Considering its importance, one must take a step back and a bird's eye view to identify the entry points in providing these positive and supportive opportunities during adolescence. Most of us favor what we call a multi-pronged, multi-sectoral approach, which fits into an ecological, conceptual, and interventional model. We will not cover the intricacies of this model, but let me stress that much more efforts must target adolescents themselves as individuals, target the family system, the school environment and structure, and of course, society at large. In your mind, you will no doubt identify gaps in legislation and budgets for India's children and youth, except in Delhi, where the budget is so high it makes other regions of the world dream. Most probably, like in many countries, reducing inequalities is not keeping pace with the promising positive political discourse. For example, are adolescent girls at the heart of programs addressing the needs of adolescents? What about adolescents with disabilities or from marginalized communities? Is there strong leadership in favor of children, adolescents, and youth? As you probably know, within the UN system, there's a strong push towards mainstreaming youth participation. And this fall, there will be an adoption of a deliberate policy UN-wide to push for children's participation. But on national levels, I think it is fair to say that from the perspective of the Committee on the Rights of the Child, economic concerns tend to always take precedence. How are adolescents faring with the Sustainable Developmental Goals, targets, and indicators? I must admit I haven't kept pace with everything that's written about what we call the SDGs, but I do recall reading maybe 2 or 3 years ago a very excellent article of which the title is The Invisibility of Adolescence Within the SDGs. And from memory, less than 10% of indicators out of 230 indicators of these Sustainable Development Goals are gender and adolescent or youth specific, a tiny, tiny minority. A lot of data is lacking. Now, we are coming up to the Summit for the Future in 2024. It will be a huge celebration in New York, and hopefully there will be an acceleration both on pushing for SDG targets in children and youth engagement. To give you an example, you may not know it, but the Sustainable Developmental Goal, Target 4.7 on education for sustainable development and global citizenship, asks that by 2030, all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and nonviolence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. Last Friday at 3 p.m., the Committee on the Rights of the Child adopted what we call a general comment on child rights and the environment, which is guidance to states, including India, on the environment and the climate change. And obviously, child protection and education are at the heart of our guidance. And this builds on the clamor and mobilization that adolescents and young people demonstrated to save our planet, and their increasingly angry demands to participate, to be consulted, and to have a say in decision-making circles. They are demanding to be empowered in ways that leave adults, educators, and parents a little bit befuddled. An example in my own home. This past April, I was invited to the first African Child Summit in Nairobi, Kenya. And I brought my 14-year-old son, who has African descent, is of partial Somali descent. And I can't tell you how proud I was to see all these hundreds of children, what we call now today children human rights defenders, and to see my son among them. But now it is as if I feel myself a little bit left behind, and let me tell you why. He befriended 3 other children aged 13 to 17 at this summit, and they submitted a concept note for a side event at this month's high-level governmental summit for a new global financial pact in Paris. Only heads of states go to this. I'm not even invited to this kind of an event. The concept note proposes to contribute to save the planet by hosting a workshop for adolescents and adults to discuss the reform of multilateral development banks, the reform of investment in banking resolving the debt crisis, these are 13, 17-year-olds, innovative and responsible financing, international tax justice. And, you know, they actually wrote this without too much adult help. And the most amazing thing is that their proposal was accepted, and they are funded by the French government to travel to Paris to hold this workshop. I joke about this a little bit. I think they're ready to take over my position on the Committee of the Rights of the Child. It is often at this stage of life when young people refine their interests, pursue their talents, and identify those vocations for which they may best seek their calling. Adolescents are characterized by a strong sense of justice, youth becoming keenly aware of the hypocrisy of adults. In this light, deficit narratives that label youth as inherently troublesome, rebellious, or dangerous to the social good are especially harmful and limit opportunities for intergenerational collaboration and support of this important yet sometimes very difficult transition. When seen from a perspective of possibility, it is clear that precious few educational models are sufficiently releasing of the incredible potential of young people. And this is where schools, families, and communities must converge, and UNESCO's Reimagining Our Future, a new social contract for education, is a really good read. Values such as respect, empathy, equality, and solidarity must be the core to the mission of universities, colleges, technical institutes, schools, secondary, primary, and all the way down into kindergarten. Education must foster ethics and support of children to be better and more capable citizens with greater awareness of their civic and environmental responsibilities. Higher education must also be social-culturally relevant. There should be an appreciation of cultural diversity, a commitment to defend human rights, and intolerance for racism, sexism, classism, ethnocentrism, and discrimination in all forms must be key educational objectives. But as we have moved through the ecological model, concentric dimensions, global, national, school, family, we should also turn to adolescents as a vulnerable special group, experiencing rapid physical, cognitive, and psychosocial growth. This affects how they feel, how they think, make decisions, and interact with the world around them. As they are emotionally oversensitive, distracted, and get hurt easily, teachers and educators, parents, are indispensable to help build self-esteem and self-confidence, and make them understand their feelings, actions, and reactions. It is a combination of autonomous exploration and benevolent support and encouragement that promotes resilience, self-esteem, and well-being in adolescents, and buffers them against the negative effects of stress and adversity. Some experts and experiential validity suggest that a relationship with at least one caring adult, not necessarily a parent, is perhaps the most single important element in protecting young people who have multiple risks in their lives. And for many children, this adult is an educator or a teacher, and even more so for adolescents who come from less privileged socioeconomic backgrounds and homes. The research is very clear on this. This notion of resilience comes in handy and has been popularized by several authors, including a French author called Boris Cyrulnik, who uses the clever notion of resilience tutor. A tutor meant in the meaning of a vertical stake around which a plant can grow and elevate towards the sun. Social emotional development in adolescence is a key element of lifespan well-being. It should be part of a contract between benevolent parental figures who benefit from the necessary material conditions to truly invest in rearing a child. Parents who have time to build a functioning family. Parents who see the value of positive parenting, and children who do not experience what we call adverse childhood experiences. Children who are not belittled or physically chastised by their parents. My conclusion. Adolescence is most definitely a barometer of health of a society. Adolescents are the equivalent of canaries in the coal mine. They get killed by the toxic gases before humans even figure out what is going on. Eco-anxiety, the global mental health crisis of adolescence, higher prevalence of suicidal ideation and behavior, gender identity and fluidity crises among adolescents. This is a symptom of a wobbly human society rather than adolescence crisis, of a wobbly human society hurtling towards a 1.5 increase in temperatures and probably even beyond. I have been asked to speak about the role of educators in strengthening support systems for adolescents. The choice of the subject was deliberate, of course, but there is an unintentional dimension that has been irking me. In many ways, the notion of strengthening support systems for adolescents is misleading. Maybe there's nothing wrong with adolescents. Maybe adolescents are simply being what they've always been, a healthy pebble in the shoe of wider society. And when we notice the discomfort caused by the pebble, we should heed the signal. We should pause and self-reflect. And of course, work to strengthen the support systems for adolescents and for the children who will turn into adolescents. And with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, sir. I used to work with this community engaged in intergenerational sex work, and I recently met 11 of these girls who are now first-generational learners in college. It was only possible because not only of their own perseverance, but because they had the support from educators, civil society, and some parts of the community. So I think it is extremely important that this theme has been picked up today. Moving on, we will now move on to the panel discussion, which is on the theme Social Emotional Learning and Adolescence. For that, I'd like to introduce the panelists for the day. For that, I also request some of our dignitaries to move to the audience in the front. We have Professor Philip D. Jaffe, who is the former vice chair and current member of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child. He's also a professor at the Center for Children's Rights and Studies. Joining us, we have Ms. Nandini Maharaj, an IAS officer. Ma'am currently serves as the Additional Director for Education for the Government of Delhi NCT. We welcome you, ma'am. I'd now like to welcome Ms. Rita Sharma, ma'am, who serves as the Director of SCRT. I'd like to welcome Ms. Pavitra, ma'am, who is the Associate Director of the Dream a Dream organization. Ma'am has been passionate about working with young people and believes in creating the support systems for young people that she didn't have access to. Currently, she works as the Associate Director of Innovation Lab. Her mission is to work with young people and transform their lives using the life skills approach. Our moderator for the panel will be Mr. Shailendra Sharma, sir, who is the Principal Advisor to the Director Education, Government of Delhi NCT. An alumnus of TISS Mumbai, he started his career with Pratham in 2002 and has been a part of its senior leadership team. In his current role, he works in shaping the education reforms of the Government of Delhi. Thank you for being a part of the panel, sir. I now hand over the stage to you.
Thank you. It looks like we have been discussing about children's issue very seriously for the last 75 minutes. No smiles. कहते ना मुस्कुराइए कि आप लखनऊ में हैं, पर दिल्ली में है तो इसलिए मुस्कुराना मना है, ऐसा भी नहीं है. You can smile. Well, I have a very interesting panel with me. And I was trying to think through where we have a professor who almost dropped out of his school. And we have two very senior colleagues, Rita Sharma and Nandini. Nandini is a youngest officer in the education department of Delhi government. Is that correct, Nandini? Yes. And both Nandini and Rita ji have been like a great student themselves. Very studious. They almost scored first in every exam that they took. And between the two extremes, like professor who was almost dropping out of the schools, and here we have two who topped almost every school exam to reach where they are right now. We have Pavitra with us, who faced difficult circumstances and came where she is. and I will not talk about myself. So here we go. Let me start with a very interesting incident that I faced a couple of years back. I was doing a survey in one village which was not far away from the capital of India's largest state, UP. And we were in a school. We were doing the reading assessment of children, trying to figure out what children can read. And those of you who have been to any Indian school, most of you, I'm sure, would notice that on the school wall there are a lot of things which is written, a lot of moral values and things. So in that school where we were at that point of time, they were written about child rights. See, every child in India has right to education, right to equality, right against exploitation, right to food, shelter, dignity, going on and on. And I saw a child about 10-year-old who was moving around. And I called him, I said, ki isko padho jara, just read it out. Because anyway, we were doing reading assessment. So this child, a very small child, he started reading. He said, every child in India has right to education, right to life, right to... And then after 3-4, he stopped. And he said, I'll first say in Hindi and then I'll translate in English. He said, ye jitna likhte hai na, utna karte nahi hai. So the amount that they write, they don't do that much. So, Professor, I'll start with you. In terms of child rights, in terms of conventions, in terms of protocols, there are a lot of things which has been written. What do you see, like to what extent you have found them to be actually translating into action and actually making difference to the life of children?
Thank you for the... Is this working?
Yes.
Thank you for the question, and I'll be very brief. To begin with, I think that all the documents that come out of think tanks and from the UN certainly don't have enough impact and are not read sufficiently, are not actionable easily, I should also add. But I do think that they reflect some very major changes in the way we think about children and adolescents. I'm not saying that the Convention on the Rights of the Child has invented anything, but it put into international human rights law some very, very fundamental principles, some of which are applied on a daily basis by all the professionals in India. The best interests of the child, for example, is a notion that everybody is familiar with. But Article 12, for example, which is the right of the child to be heard and to participate in any decision-making that concerns him directly or indirectly, is a revolutionary article that, now that it is codified, certainly forces us to rethink participation in a different way. And I remind you, the Convention on the Rights of the Child is binding. And the last point I want to make, up until the Convention on the Rights of the Child, in terms of how societies around the world saw children, they were objects of protection. They were concerns for paternalistic care. Since the Convention, it has shifted. Children are inherently bearers of rights. They have rights that we must recognize and that are actionable by themselves. And this is something that is transitioning still, so I think you have to see the long view.
Thank you, Professor. I'll ask this question slightly differently to Ritaji, to you. Ritaji is the highest ranking career educationist in the education department of Delhi. But before that, I mean, the interesting part is that she has occupied almost all the positions that anybody in the education can. She started as a teacher, she went on to become a principal, the district education officers, then the additional director responsible for many of the policies that is formulated, and also now responsible for teacher training, research and everything. Now in the journey of your own evolution, how have you seen the understanding of child rights actually percolating down to to the schools in the understanding of teachers, understanding of parents, and to what extent you feel that the things have changed in the last 2-3 decades?
For a wonderful introduction. I don't think I really deserve that. I still consider myself as a learner in the education and fortunate enough to work for the cause of children, being a teacher or educational administrator. See, as far as my experience goes in various capacities in education department, I've seen that what other people have also pointed out, that children are most vulnerable and first to be sidelined when there is a problem or when there is sharing of resources to be done, and we prioritize other areas or maybe adult or higher education or these kind of things. Primary education specifically, because their voice is very small, and pre-primary education, again, it's the same story. But I think after the formation of various organizations who are working with for child rights, and for example DCPCR, and continuous updation of skills of teachers in terms of their training for the protection of children's rights and how they can implement it in their classrooms, we have seen we have started to see a change in the perception of teachers, parents, and children themselves. I'll quote a small example here. The DCPCR is instrumental in that. They have trained several teachers, and some studies have also been conducted. And in those studies or in those initiatives, I'll point out one initiative. They started this a mission kind of thing where the counselors are there, teachers are there, and students can come and share their problems with them. It was a very small incident that a child was not coming to the school for a few days, and the counselor or teacher inquired, and then they found out the child has been taken to their home state, and it was a state where child marriages were rampant, and they were planning to marry her off. And the teacher was talking to the girl. She came to know, and then she reported the incident, and fortunately that incident was stopped. Had it been the earlier situation where we would have said, okay, it's the parents' decision, they have the right to decide about the child's future or the girl's future, teacher or maybe, the views of the student, it doesn't matter, then I think the situation would not have been different. It would have been what would have been happening years ago or many years ago. Similarly, now parents are also becoming aware. You can see that more and more women, they are supporting their daughters for higher education. They are supporting their daughters for combining their vocational education as well as higher education, be it through distance mode or open and learning systems, which are available in Delhi, in the Directorate of Education, and they are not holding them back. Earlier, it was a scenario that if a sibling is sick, the girl child or maybe the elder child will be asked to stay back at home to take care of the child. Now, with the continuous involvement of teachers, with the continuous, parent-teacher meet and awareness about the rights of children to education and to a fundamental life rights which they are having towards living a life of dignity, these instances have come down. And there are several researchers who have shown that the number of girls securing their achievement in the board exams have risen, especially in class 10th and 12th. So I think what you were asking was like it was cascading down. It is cascading down, but I think we still have to wait and see to how we can speed it up or to what an extent it can show. Extent has been, it has seeped down.
Thank you. Pavitra, I would want you to reflect on what just Ritaji shared, your own experience as a child has also been quite a challenging. And now you work with very young children. You have set up an innovation lab, working to improve their life. What do you see? What kind of thing when you see with these children that you work and you as a child growing, the challenges that you face? Do you resonate with what Rita ji has been sharing?
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I feel honored and privileged to be part of this panel. Definitely a lot of the family members today would be looking up to me. So we are 3 sisters. I'm the middle one. I have the elder sister, and then I have the younger one. So, you know, especially in family, there's always this fight that used to happen where my parents felt insecure because we are 3, daughters. There's always a lot of fight that happened. My dad kept saying that, our future is not secured because we don't have boy in the family. And everybody in the family also did put my parents down. So which made him, I still remember my mom saying that how he was fine when my elder sister was born, but it was not okay when me and my younger one came out because there was no boy in the family. So a lot of that trauma did impact on our education because he became alcoholic. He was an abusive husband. Thanks to my mother for tolerating, and she ensured that all of us, went to public school. It is when I was 15-year-old, and ours is the first generation that pursued, higher education, that moved beyond the 10th grade. So I still remember I completed my 10th grade, and then there was this big fight that happened at home where my dad, felt scared because we were all 15 and 16, and for them in 3 years, they have to save a lot of money to ensure that we get married and move out. Even in family, people labeled us saying that, it is that alcoholic, person's daughter. So that is the reputation that we had. And literally nobody used to, come to support. So it is 15 years old. And then there was this incident. There's this big fight that happened. And somehow I felt that this is not okay. I think I need to start supporting my mother. And I should drop out of education system. And I was in the verge of dropping out of education system. And then my friend said, there's this one program that's happening. Why don't we go and watch? And in school, I always used to participate in cultural activities and sports. And I happened to go for one program where, children were giving performance. And it happened to be Dream a Dream's summer finale. And I met Vishal Talreja. At that time, Dream a Dream was very small. And I told him everything that I was going through. I still remember, I think that is the first time that I had an adult who was caring and compassionate, heard what I was going through. So he said, why don't you come and see me in office? And I went and met Vishal, and I said, I want to ensure that, I get job because my mother is alone and I really want to support her. And this happened, and he helped me reflect that why, 16 is not the right age to drop out. At that time, even I didn't want it to be vulnerable. I said, I want to take break, go back, I really want to work, and that is the language that I used. So, in this journey, as I was talking to, the mentors in Dream a Dream, I learned that there's also something called evening college, and that's when I learned. So I enrolled in evening college, and morning I went to work. When I went to work is when I realized that 18 is a mandatory if one need to be employed. And a lot of this learning happened, and today I regret that, a lot of these things was not incorporate in my education. Until 15 years old, I could not utter a word in English. And English is something that I learned after I joined Dream.
I'll just like to you. The children that you now work with, do you see many of them coming and facing similar kind of challenge that you faced, or there's a difference in what they come with?
So it's the similar kind of issues that young people are facing. Today, as I'm working in the innovation lab, what I realize is that it's not just young people that need to shift, but I also feel adult around them that also need to shift our mindset. And especially in education system, I feel there is an urgent need for us to incorporate life skills in everything that we do. Because once we graduate, come out of the education system, it's not just 6 subjects that matter to us, but today we all know that how creativity, imagination, being resilient, responsible, happiness, being able to identify our emotions is very important. So I feel there are those challenges that is continuing, but I think rather than telling every kid to be resilient and responsible, I feel if we shift the adults around them, there's going to be a lot of impact on the child, because each adult works with 50 to 60 young people. And
so Nandini, Pavitra is talking about adults' mind shift. We have in Delhi government a program called Happiness Curriculum, going on for the last 5 years. And you are in charge of this program at this stage. Do you see that program, I mean, it's definitely work to improve, enhance social emotional skills of children. But do you also see that curriculum as a gateway for the grown-ups, for the teachers also to see their role differently? And maybe for the other audience, you can explain about what this happiness curriculum is all about.
Thank you for the question, Sharenji. Happiness curriculum, many of you may know, some I would like to acquaint with. It's a mindset curriculum that runs from nursery till class 8 with the focus on 4 specific, using 4 methods to communicate the ideology. The methods are mindfulness, then we have stories, activities, and expression. And the ideology is basically one of introspection. That when you come to school, you start your day thinking and relaxing and introspecting 2 to 5 minutes by yourself. And then you question the very basic things of life. What is my purpose in life? How do I relate with that purpose to my family, to my society, and then finally to the environment and to nature at large? That is the pedagogy behind the happiness curriculum. The way we teach is not through teaching. It is through discussion. There is no dictation. There is no question answer. There is no exam. And there is absolutely no right and wrong. There is no moral story. This is what you should do. This is what you shouldn't do. The idea is to encourage children to think for themselves on the deeper aspects of life and of survival and of realities. So does it impact adults? That is something I really hope it does, but we try to inculcate parental engagement within that book. There is a section called Dekho, Poocho, Samjho. Look, ask, understand, in which we encourage our students to go home and talk about the stories that they discussed at home. So I'll give an example. There was one story in which a student had 20 rupees and he wanted to buy a ice cream sundae. So he goes to the restaurant and the waitress who comes and asks for his order, her hand is cut really badly. It's bleeding and he can see that. He looks across and he sees that there's a shop, there's a chemist right outside, and he knows that a packet of Band-Aid costs 20 rupees. What would he choose? And that's it. What would you choose? If you choose this, why did you choose this? Suppose if you didn't choose this, then what would that say about you? Is that okay not to choose? Do you want to choose? And we tell our students to go home and discuss that with their parents, and hopefully those discussions are carrying on. We do have a lot of anecdotal evidence that it is carrying on.
So you said there is no right or wrong response in the happiness class, and it is a lot of dialogue among children and between children and their teacher. Now, if you look at traditionally how we do teaching learning for say other subjects, the temptation of teacher is always to tell their children to come to the right response. Now, how do they resist? Because it's the same set of teachers who are conducting happiness class. How do they change themselves, transform themselves in the happiness class to be resisting to give the right response? Because in this case, the story that you told, the temptation would be to tell them, "Nahi, Band-Aid," because helping other is the right thing to do. So how would the teacher resist themselves from not prodding children to say this thing?
I'm so glad you asked that because I could barely restrain myself from saying that हमारे बच्चे ऐसा कहते हैं कि Band-Aid पहना देंगे. I could barely restrain myself from saying that our students are all saying that we will go buy the Band-Aid and not eat the ice cream. So I think that is one example. We are teaching our educators and our teachers to not prod. But what you're saying was a problem that we did kind of find, that the introspection aspect of happiness curriculum might get compromised with the curse of knowledge that we all kind of bear. So the idea of happiness curriculum is largely based on this philosophy called Jivan Vidya, as many of us know. And the concept of non-didactic, communication-based education that we have created in happiness is also coming from that philosophy of Jivan Vidya. And what we have done is that we have created a regular system for our teachers and our heads of schools or principals to attend these Jivan Vidya shivers, in which they see the practice of non-didactic communication in action. So we did that by converting our teachers into students. That is our idea here.
Thank you. Professor, you heard and you saw a happiness class today morning in one of the schools. Now, can you also, based on your research and your study of different school system, do you think that there are any parallel or similar example where social emotional learning is being made part of the school system to have a lot of thinking children, a lot of engaging classrooms? Do you have an example that you can share with us?
Thank you for the question. Yes and no. Yes, there are tidbits, crumbs of what you're proposing as a program that occur in different school systems. And I can think of nurturing empathy in school programs in Finland. I know that we're introducing in various countries moments of mindfulness for students, but your program, and indeed I visited this morning, it's very impressive, I must say, because it's all-encompassing, and you can tell how the children were so invested in trying to reach into themselves and seek this self-awareness, but also to share with the class in some sort of a sounding board experience, which reinforces group identity and increases trust in others to be able to share, inner thoughts. And the dimension that you just added about going back to the family and continuing this discussion and fostering a communication, which in many modern families you don't have time to do really anymore. I mean, I think it's a wonderful program, and to make it short, I definitely think it's a best practice that I'll take back with me wherever I go and within the UN system. And I think it's something that you should be writing about. And if there are results coming out, and it's sort of paradoxical to say if you can quantify and make it evidence-based, I mean, it will be that much more useful. But even if you don't, it's already a marvelous experiment that you're carrying out.
Any other example that you can think of, which is like you found similar kind of approach being followed anywhere?
Yeah, again, I mean, I can think of, I don't have a catalog, but I can think of one other situation, but they're not quite the same. I mean, the idea that you pause and that you self-reflect is not something that is introduced in traditional school programs. I mean, in my country, in Switzerland, I mean, taking a period to self-reflect there would be pushback because you're taking time away from knowledge that you're supposed to inculcate and learn by heart and belong to the traditional fields and disciplines that we all know and suffered through. I don't know if it would have been enough for me to stay in school if that had existed, because there were so many negative aspects. But I can think of an example in France where there's also, and this may be interesting for you as well, they try to pair various classes in different schools to resonate with one another over these stories and how they're reflecting on their emotions in that given class, to sort of increase the range, if you will, and not stay just within the class, and reach out to other children as well, so for a wider community. But again, these are very narrow compared to what you're introducing in the classrooms.
Thank you. Risaji, hearing this story of happiness curriculum, and also trying to connect with the right-based approach, at the core of it lies dignity. I mean, we acknowledge child to be a being, and therefore the dignity of the child becomes very important. Now, how do you reconcile this part with our conventional and cultural fixation with discipline? Because right from the point the child is born, the elders are very keen to discipline the child. This role is played to an extent by parents, and then parents and schools jointly, and that discipline also involves a bit of violence. I am saying it in a very modest way, but there are violence. So if you were to also think that discipline is also important, how do we understand that part and reconcile the arena of discipline in a more non-violent fashion? I mean, how do we handle this?
See, here we have to address two issues. First is culture, and the second is adult skill. Because culturally we have been, psyched in the way that this is the only method where we can discipline children, and this is the correct method. And it has been continuing. So adults are lacking skill to think otherwise. They themselves are lacking the skill. And they themselves have been, tuned into thinking in this particular way, that if you want your child to be successful, if the child has to learn something, you have to discipline them, and these are the tactics by which the child can be disciplined. Maybe verbal, non-verbal reprimands, or violence, the way you were saying. So if you want to change that, or if we have to, instill some other values, then I think we have to work for both the things, culture as well as adult skilling. And I think this happiness curriculum we were mentioning right now as a mindset curriculum, it is a step in that direction. Apart from that, the teachers who are the primary source of interaction with the children, and this whole paraphernalia of discipline, it emanates from the classroom. The teacher needs the students to be quiet, to behave in a certain way, so that they can transit their teaching learning systems over there. So we have to train teachers not to be judgmental, not to think in a certain way. They themselves have to be, we have to work on their mindset. Then only they can think in a different way. Then only they will work with the children in a different way. Right now, when the children see their teachers behaving in a certain way, then a monitor is appointed in the classroom, and the monitor also started behaving in the same way. And it is, ingrained in the psyche of the monitor also, that these tactics of disciplining the children, they are good tactics, they are the only things, and generally other students, they also grasp these tactics, and later on in their life, when they become adult, they also started behaving like that. So it becomes a vicious circle. So you cannot rely on it, on one method or one strategy or one incident to break that cycle. We have to work from a kind of multifarious approach, where we have to work on the cultural aspect also, where you have to work on the skilling of adults also, especially teachers. And gradually, when we have parent-teacher meeting, when we notice that the parents are also adopting some kind of violent methods, it may not be discipline, it may be something else, like Pavitra shared, other things. So I think the connect with the student, the emotional bondage, and the social emotional learning which we were talking about, the base itself is kindness, social emotional learning, and that's how you try to manage your aggression. That's how you try to manage the aspects which are adverse to the situation and carry forward them in your day-to-day life.
Thank you. You heard our 4 panelists coming from a very different experience, personal experiences also, but talking about this important issue of social emotional learning, child rights, and how this subject matter itself is evolving. If you have any question or any short comment, feel free to ask. This is your occasional. And by the time you frame your question, I'll quickly go to Pavitra to just very briefly touch upon this part that Rita ji has just mentioned. How adults are also responding to this new learning that are happening, and whether in your own experience you saw the change in that domain.
In my experience of working with children, I reflect a lot on myself. What worked for me, what is it that's something that didn't work for me. So while I facilitate and work with young people, some of the things that I felt worked with children is co-learning, co-creating, co-planning, building that personal connection, safe space, validating and not really giving solution, and then working on our own biases of how it shows up when we work with children. So these are some of the things that has worked with young people.
Great, thank you. Any question? हाँ, please. उधर माइक दे दीजिए किसी को. या एक दो लोगों को देखिए उधर माइक खड़ा कर दीजिए पीछे.
I would like to ask 2 questions. One about the DCPCR and other about the education system.
So DCPCR is not sitting here right now.
Okay.
So you can skip the first question, come to the second one.
Okay. Everyone would have heard about an incident in NCR where a well-educated couple tortured their domestic help. So how can you say that admission to a good school, a reputed school, ensure the future of a child? He or she may become an abuser himself. Many of educated people, I say more than 50%, have a narrow-minded thinking and are stick to radical and outdated cultural customs. I think only education and educational degrees are not enough. Right and universal and humanistic education is necessary for it.
Thank you. So you have given answer also. So we'll take the next question.
Hi, my name is Tanya. My question is more on the lines of when we are talking about social emotional learning, do we have to see social emotional learning only in one pocket, or how is it that we can align social emotional learning into our respective academic classes? How would that look like?
Nandini, yeah.
Have you ever wanted to go to the gym, Tanya? No? Not even wanted. Just in general, okay, I will address the gathering. Has anybody wanted to go to the gym? Wow, has anybody wanted to work out, like exercise? Okay, people want to exercise. So, to those who want to go to the gym, let's say exercise is equivalent to going to the gym right now. Are you doing this with the exclusive purpose of beating up somebody? Like you want to be strong enough to hit someone? Is that the purpose of going to the gym or working out? No. I think we all understand it's an everyday thing. It gives me daily strength. It makes me lift on a daily basis. It's exercise. Is that correct? So when we talk about academics and we say, what will happen if I do algebra? What benefit do I gather from trigonometry? If we add that SEL angle to it, that it is not about doing that particular algebraic equation, just like it is not about doing that particular weightlifting motion. It is about a daily benefit that you get from it, a daily sense of mental mathematics, mental gymming that you do, that you get from your academics. So if you add those elements in your school education on a daily basis, in which you bring out how academics affect your day-to-day life. Algebra is mental gymming. If you can add that and you can make those analogies for every other aspect of education that you have, perhaps we'll be able to make an overall connect between lifestyles and how you live your life. That is what I am substituting social emotional learning for, how you live your life and what you study in school. Thank you.
So if I may add to that, I think that is one of the gap today in education system, that we look at it as two separate things. Right? When we talk about life skills and social emotional learning, usually it is a separate class. So I think, Tanya, to your question, I think there is urgent need to integrate it with everything that we do with children. Like while I'm doing math, can I actually, not only focus on 2 + 2 = 4, but can we also, help them understand not just like, I learn math and I will be an engineer, but then math is also important if one need to be a carpenter. So can we also talk from that angle? So it is important to integrate it and not look at it as a separate thing.
So at the risk of receiving notice from DCPCR, I invite one last question. Yes.
This pertains to a different curriculum because I heard 3 mentioned. And it's a matter of slight concern. I mean, the other curriculum that was talked about was the curriculum for patriotism. Mm-hmm. Now, I think that in this country we are concerned that there are many interpretations of, caring and loving your country. I think I love my country. But there's a concern that, you don't want to be veering towards a form of jingoism that's becoming a bit more prevalent around, and that's a matter of concern. So how is it that your curriculum makes a distinction between loving your country but not necessarily being jingoistic or placing nationalist concerns over and above humanist ones? I think the term has become rather weighty, and I think that I would like to hear how Delhi is showing a better example.
So let me answer this question. You answered the question that you raised in the second part of your thing. So you were referring to Deshbhakti curriculum, the patriotism. That is the whole purpose of it. It should not raise the red herring that we should not even mention this. The idea is to engage on that subject matter and see your role as a citizen, as a human being, where you place yourself. If we run away from engaging with any subject matter, then it is going to come through different ways. It's like talking about sex education. And the school system have been running away from that because the moment you refer a word sex, there is some red alarm. So similarly, we don't want patriotism also to be reduced to that level. If the moment you mention that, somebody is thinking, oh, how could you even use that term? So we want to tackle that head on, and that is why. And the details of how we do that can be found in the curriculum. Again, it's a dialogue, it's a discussion, it's like expressing your opinion and talking about it and thinking about it. Thank you. So with that, we close this session. Thank you so much for the wonderful discussion, and thank you all of you to be such patient listeners. Thank you.
I request the panel to stay on stage as you can felicitate some of our other child contributors.
Okay,
Ria Montero contributed a painting to the journal's 4th issue. She is a student of class 11 from Father Angel School. I request Ms. Rita Sharma ma'am to do the honors. I request Ms. Nandini Maharaj ma'am to felicitate Arohi Dolare for her contribution to a painting to the journal's 4th issue. She is a student of class 8th from SES Gurukul.
Farzana is a student of class 11 from GS Kiwi Karola School. I request Professor Jaffe to please felicitate her. Ritika Chaudhary contributed a write-up to the journal's 4th issue. She is a student of class 11th from Vikas Bharati Public School. I request Pavitra ma'am to felicitate her.
Priya contributed a write-up to the journal's 4th issue. She is a student of class 12 from Army Public School, Shankar Vihar. I request Mr. Shalendra Sharma to do the honors. We could not find Ashraf Ali and Lavisha Gupta. If you guys are here, just come to the stage for the felicitation. I repeat the names, Ashraf Ali and Lavisha Gupta. Lavisha Gupta contributed a painting to the journal's 4th issue. She is a student of class 11 from Father Angel School. I request Ms. Rita Sharma ma'am to do the honors.
Thank you so much.
I request the panel to stay put. I would now like to invite Mr. Ronald Abraham, editor of the journal and founder and the director of ID Insight, to throw some light on the theme of the journal.
Good evening, everyone. I realize that I am standing in between food and all of you, and for some of you, I'm also standing in between a flight and all of you. But I do think that this is an important segment of today's event, so I invite you to bear with me. And the reason it's important is because we're trying to bring all of you in to the process of the journal. So my role today is to essentially invite all of you to consider submitting a piece for the journal, for the upcoming issue of the journal that's going to be published in December. So, today Anuragji started with a framing of the journal as a collection of stories. It might have reminded many of you of a specific story that was that came to you. Many of the folks who spoke today spoke about various aspects of their lives and various other stories that might have reminded you of stories. The speeches that we heard today, the panel discussion that we just witnessed, including some of the comments that our esteemed anchors also made, must have sparked specific ideas that you would have had. And many of you in the room today are actually working on issues of child rights and child issues, whether it's on trying to think about ways of improving education outcomes or health outcomes or mitigating issues related to child labor, discrimination, trafficking. You are teachers, you're entrepreneurs, your government practitioners, your policy makers, and some of you are children who face these issues personally. So to all of you, I wanted to invite you to consider submitting for the journal, for the journal's upcoming issue in December. And to do this, and to ensure this is not one of those empty pieces, I'm going to give you a little bit of work right now. So all of you have a folder. It has a notepad, and it has a pen. So can you all, even if you're not thinking of, can you all just take that out and do a small exercise with me right now? I'm going to wait. I'm looking at all of you. I can see who's reaching out for their folders, and I can see who's on their phone. मुझको यहाँ से सब कुछ दिखता है. हाँ फिर ठीक है. लेकिन नहीं, आप एक्चुअली पेपर पे ही लिख लीजिए. Okay. I would like you to think about a specific topic that's related to child rights or issues, because the next journal is going to be an open issue journal, so it could be any topic covering various sectors. If you're a researcher, I would assume that you're already working on very specific topics, so you should just write that. If you are a practitioner, if you're a policy maker, if you're working in this field, or if you've read a book recently that you want to do a review of, then you can think about that and think about that. Now I want you to write a particular perspective in 4 or 5 words, just something that only you need to understand. You're not going to submit this to anyone. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to submit this. Right now into that notepad. So can you write something, a specific topic that you are interested in working on, or that you're passionate about, and you might consider submitting something to the journal. Right now, just write it into that notepad right now. And remember, this is just a scribble for you to understand. It doesn't need to be submitted. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds for this. And there's going to be an awkward silence for 30 seconds so that you can all think about this. About 15 more seconds. Okay. By now, if you've written something, you have a sense of what you had in mind. Even if it's not a complete sentence or it's not a complete thought, you have a reasonably good sense. Now I'm going to ask you a question. Will you consider submitting something to the upcoming issue of the journal that's going to be published in December? Yes or no? Just write it down right now as a yes or no. Again, you're not submitting it to anyone. This is just a commitment to yourself. Right now, you've not committed to us. So yes or no, just write it down. You could actually now say, मुझे idea अच्छा नहीं लगा, मैं नहीं submit करूँगा, तो no लिख लीजिए. अगर आपको yes लिखना है तो ज़रूर yes लिखिए. Okay. Now, for those of you who have written yes, in this green brochure, in the middle page, there's an About Us section and there's a Contact Us section. There's an email address given in the Contact Us section, cfjournal-tcpcr@delhi.gov.in. It's a very complicated email ID, which is why I recommend just looking at the green brochure middle page. I request you, if you've written yes, to just send an email right now or today requesting what is the process for submission to the journal. It's also in the folder? There you go. Perfect. And so with that, I conclude. Some of you have thought of something. No, sorry, all of you have thought of a topic. Some of you have committed to submitting something. And so we look forward to your submissions around an issue that is related to child rights and how to make children happy, something that's close to your heart, something that you're working on. And if you have committed to submitting something, we look forward to your submissions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for taking us right back to classrooms with that exercise also. I would now like to invite the chairperson, DCPCR, Shri Anurag Kundu, sir, for a vote of thanks, who has envisioned the journal to not just be a medium where the matters of children are put forth by people who study childhoods, but more importantly, extend the platform for people who support, nurture, and raise them.
I stand between you and, as Ronald said, for some flights, the others food. So I will be very, very brief. First and foremost, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to Professor Philip, who has traveled several thousand miles to be with us, and we are genuinely grateful for the time and energy and a part of your life that you're choosing to spend with us. Thank you very much. I'm extremely grateful to Isha, who has anchored today's event. She is a student in a Delhi government school in Rohini. Did I get that right, Isha? Thank you, Mithat. As I've said previously as well, you are a very good anchor, but you should really not do it with children. You are eclipsed. Isha, you are brilliant. My sincerest gratitude to Manisha and Nirbhay, who were the language interpreter, sign language interpreter, and it's not easy to do sign language interpretation for almost 2.5 hours. So my sincerest gratitude to Manisha and Nirbhay. Thank you very much. My sincerest gratitude to Ms. Vandana Bhardwaj, who's the vice principal of the school, and has made this entire event possible. Ma'am, we are genuinely and sincerely very, very grateful to you. I'm also very, very grateful to many more people, but let me first focus on the peer reviewers who made this journal the way it has shaped up. And peer reviewers very often do contribute to building of an institution of a journal anonymously and silently, but ultimately they are indeed the backbone of building a journal. My special thanks to the authors, both current and the previous ones, for making this journal come alive and read in your hands. Lastly, no journal can be built without its advisory board, without its editorial board. Let me start by expressing my gratitude to Justice Lokur, and I'm very sincere in saying special thanks to the editorial and advisory board, because and let me put it in French and say that you were absolutely crazy enough to join me when I said I have an idea. And that I was extremely happy to find that I'm not the only nut in the society, and there are many who are even more, if not equal, and as crazy. So I'm deeply grateful to your craziness that you joined us in this journey, and Soledad, Justice Lokur, so many who could not be here right now. Deepest gratitude. The editors is what make eventually a journal possible. And we have Dr. Vandana Prasad steadfastly holding the journal. We have Dr. Kamaini. We have many more who could not be here. But most important, Dr. Vinita. And Dr. Vinita is our chief editor, and she has, much to our misfortune, decided to step down. So this is literally her last day as chief editor of this journal, and I cannot express in any words, actually, how grateful we are for all that you have done and how far you have brought this journal. Thank you very much, Dr. Kaul. I used to think running a journal is extremely easy, but I cannot be more wrong. The digital journal is made possible by Praveen, our tech consultant. But more importantly, this entire journal, both digital and what is in your hand, is made possible by people who have managed the journal end to end. It started with Ayushi, taken forward by Aditi, but now most important, Garima. Garima, can you wave your hand? And I'm absolutely sincere in saying that Garima is equal to this journal. And lastly, my deepest thanks to all the children who have thought that we are worthy of their expression. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Now you all can move for the dinner.